Hi, I'm Thomas Heidenworth, again here with Wade Kisner, and we're at episode 5 already of Setter Tales. And we got a pretty exciting guest tonight. Some of you may remember a TV show called Hunting with Hank, so we've brought on Des Young with us tonight, very known setter guy, and
Should be a
and
fun
we
one.
couldn't think of a better person to have on tonight.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of setters out there named Hank. I know that, and there's a good reason why. And yeah, I remember watching that show, and back when there wasn't any upland shows on really, and so Des was one of the first pioneers to get out there and try to capture some bird footage on film, and it's pretty difficult to do. So anyway, it'll be fun. We're
Yeah,
really looking forward to it, and there he is.
how
Guys,
are we doing?
good. Thank you.
Good. Well, we just kind of want to get started, and once again, thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Oh,
And
sure.
we're excited, and to our guests out there, if you have any questions for Des, just post them up on the thing, and I'll go through them as we can, and we'll get to it. But first, I guess first of all, I just kind of want to have you explain, a little bit of who you are. I will admit I'm a little young. Back when you were on TV, I was
Ooh, ooh,
probably
that
probably
hurt.
watching the cartoons, but I
I
have
wasn't. I wasn't. So
I have heard of you. I knew exactly who you were,
I'm there with you.
and
Yes, I'm there
Oh,
with you, buddy.
God.
I'm very familiar with what you've done and seen some of the YouTube clips that I could find, and
Oh,
and
thank you.
so um, it's always a good thing to have guys of your generation to look up to and see that
Oh,
that passion keeps rolling. So that's kind of my thing. I like passing this passion of bird dogs, especially English setters, on. So let's just have you kind
yeah,
of tell a little story about yourself, how everything
yeah,
started, and I know your very special friend Hank is in the Hall of Fame.
yes, he
He's
is.
since aged on, but
Yeah,
I know he's a pretty special dog. And if you want to kind
yeah.
of give the a rundown of everything about you, and we'll go from there.
Okay, let's see. Started as a professional singer at 18 during the folk music era. Worked nightclubs and what my mother called dives to put myself through college. Have a degree in speech communications. Was in the outdoors as far back as I can remember. My whole family hunted and fished, including my mother and my cousin Gary, my older cousin Gary, always came by the house when I was a kid to pick me up to go fly fishing or bird hunting, even before I could carry a shotgun. So it's been a great journey.
What, as far as the bird hunting goes, I know that is that something that you were into before dogs came into your life?
Oh, yeah. Our whole family, we did almost everything in the outdoors. Fishing in the summer, bird hunting in the fall, and my parents and my uncle and cousin hunted big game in the winter. And so I was literally born into the outdoors. And it, it was just a great opportunity for me to share some of those adventures with the viewers.
What, and when did you get your first dog? Was that your first dog, Hank, or did you have a dog before that?
If you're talking as an adult, Hank was my first. But I had dogs before that as a kid, of course.
Okay.
Springers had,
Everybody always, we've been pretty lucky with a lot of our guests, and all their dogs were, most of their first dogs were either their uncles or grandpas, the first one they hunted behind. And
yeah,
so far, I think we're 5 for 5 on English setters as far as the guests go. So
wow.
what was, I guess, what was the first dog that you did hunt with? And can you remember a special hunt with that first dog you ever went with? Or,
Yes, yes. It was a Springer Spaniel, and he, the poor guy, I was a kid, so I did my best to try to train him. And he did his best to work for me in the field, even, so there's the two of us out there knowing absolutely nothing about what we were doing, but we tried really hard. And so that was kind of my introduction to bird hunting was through the Springers that we had.
they are definitely something to have to keep up with too.
Yeah,
And even
yeah,
if they don't know what they're doing, they cover enough ground. So I don't think I've ever hunted with a Springer that didn't cover every piece of grass. So if there
yeah.
was a bird there to scare up most likely, they figure it out pretty quick,
Yeah.
and always that first bird you shoot's always pretty special. I can still remember the first bird I shot. So
Me too.
when
Yep.
you're out there not knowing what you're doing, and especially on your first hunt by yourself with
Yep.
with a dog or whatever, it's pretty special. So we'll
Yeah.
kind of get in. I know like 1995 you started the show. Can you kind of explain a little bit about how that started and some of the
Wow.
most memorable shows you did?
Was it that long ago, you guys? Oh, wow. Let's see. Well, I I had Springer Spaniels and Labradors, and when I lost my last Labrador, I thought about switching to a pointing dog because my wife Karen Ann wanted to hunt, and she couldn't keep up with a Flushing dog. So that's how I came about getting a Llewellyn setter. I researched all the setter breeders, settled on one in Enola, Arkansas, asked if he had any male puppies, and he did, and he sent me Hank. Wow.
That's how it started. And yeah, they have a way of changing your life forever.
Oh.
And
Oh,
and
yeah.
it
Well, and
becomes a
Hank
lifestyle for sure.
Hank was so forgiving because I mean, I've never trained a pointing dog ever. So I don't know if you remember this author. I got a book written by Richard Wolters, which is called Gun Dog.
Right.
And in that book, he explained how you can step by step, as an amateur trainer, train a bird dog to what you wanted. And I followed his book religiously and ended up with Hank. Pretty cool.
Yeah. And so now you're up in Oregon, right? That's
Right,
where-
in
is
this-
that
in-
where
in
you've always
Portland.
been? Is that where you've always been?
I grew up on a ranch in eastern Oregon near Pendleton, which is the Pendleton Roundup location. And we had, I mean, really, Pendleton is just a little spot. And then outside there are wheat fields and there are canyons and there are draws. And so a kid like me could go out there with a shotgun, poke around in some of those areas, and once in a while find a bird.
And so I know there's a lot of different species of birds out there. I know there's some pheasants out there, and
Yeah.
what else were you hunting at that time?
Hungarian partridge, valley quail, mountain quail. Boy, there's a bird to hunt. Mountain quail. Wow. Those guys are really tough. But they're in the eastern Oregon mountains, the Blue Mountains here. And so for me, it was a opportunity to just get out into the field and poke around. I just loved doing that. And as a kid, I mean, really, growing up on a ranch, then being able to go out into the Blue Mountains and chase grouse, and then come home and ride my horse. I mean, really, it was just almost idyllic.
I guess so. Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
What? So you got Hank, and
yeah,
he's learning the ropes, and you're doing some
Yeah.
training.
yeah.
And if you're like my sweet Lou was, he was training me while I was training him at the same time.
Oh,
a little
yeah.
bit. So,
Absolutely.
but at some point, then you decided you got like I did at one time. You got this crazy idea that you could probably make a television show and
Yeah.
let other people experience this wonderful thing that you got to see every day when you were out there walking behind hunting over Hank.
Yeah.
And how did that all unfold?
Well, I started singing for a living when I was 19 in the folk music era. So I felt comfortable in front of audiences, which then transferred easily to being comfortable in front of a camera. I mean, that was pretty easy to do. So that is pretty much the genesis of how this whole thing started. And Hank was, golly, you guys, he was something. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun if we could show Hank on camera and let people see a really good bird dog at work? And so I came up with the concept of hunting with Hank. I have a friend who was in television as a cameraman and a director. And I went to him and I said, so what do you think do you think we could do this? And he said, absolutely. So we did a pilot show, sent it into the Outdoor Life Network, And they were looking for programming. I mean, come on. How lucky can a guy get? They were looking for programming. So they said, well, let's try 7 shows. So we taped 7 shows. And then after that, it was year after year.
You know, it's amazing how back then you had, you know, the Outdoor Channel and Outdoor
Right.
Life TV and
Right.
and now with YouTube and
Yeah.
you can just go downtown and buy a 4K GoPro
Yep.
and everybody's got that. But I still
Yeah.
feel, you know, I can watch guys walk around the field and Wade with his show, you know, I felt a better, maybe a more personal connection with some narrating and with guys out in the field kind of following, watching. And
Yeah.
I guess I've tried to do a little self-filming myself and I was on a big farm and I was, you know, talking into my GoPro, trying to make my own little figure this thing out. And my buddy that owns the ground I saw him pull up and he didn't see my truck. He knew I was there, so he was watching me through the spotting scope. And he goes, "Who were you talking to out there?" I said, "Well, I kind of got my camera hidden because I didn't want you to think I was crazy." And he goes, "Well, I watched you for like a half hour and we were sitting here giggling because you were talking to yourself." So everybody knows I can talk to about anybody and usually talk to myself fairly well too. So,
Oh,
but yeah, it's great, you know, what you guys have done, and that, you know, I kind of aspire to do that someday. And just hearing your story is incredible and how that all started, and sound like it kind of you just got to go for it, and if it happens, it happens, and that's kind of what
Yeah.
we're doing here. So
well, for me, it just evolved. It started with me singing in nightclubs and bars and other places that my mother didn't want me to be in. And then from there, I got really comfortable in front of audiences, any kind of audience. And then because I was also in the outdoors and loving hunting, when I got Hank, it seemed like a no-brainer. It just seemed so easy. Hank was easy to train. He was handsome to look at. He was great in the field. He did everything I asked him to do. So, a friend of mine was a local director in local television. And I went to him and I said, so what do you think? And he said, let's do it. And there you go. 11 years.
Did you, are there some hunts that stick out as maybe ones that were more challenging? Maybe
Oh.
ones that you said, I know that we've had some of those, so
Oh, man.
sometimes it doesn't always go according to plan, right?
I think from a television standpoint, I think the worst were the timber hunts for blue grouse, rough grouse. Oh my gosh. Those were so tough on the camera guys, and tough on Hank because of the terrain but they were worthwhile. I mean, they were great shows. We got some great footage, and we also did, I don't know if you guys know this, we did a Himalayan snowcock hunt
Wow.
in Nevada. And a Himalayan snowcock is the size of a small turkey. I mean, they're huge. And they live in the toughest terrain, steep, rugged mountains. And I said to my crew, I said, hey, let's go do a snowcock hunt. And they, not knowing what they were, they said, okay, let's go. So we ended up there. Got one. Oh, man, that was tough.
So, you know, just going up in that rugged terrain, our biggest hill is probably a road ditch around here. So we're not into the big, tall terrain as much. And
Yeah.
I haven't had the opportunity to travel and do some hunts, and that is on the bucket list, and it's going to happen. But, you know, did you have any fears as far as when you get up in that area, you know, especially back then, no offense, of keeping location on Hank and just,
Oh, yeah.
you got cliffs, probably got
Oh, yeah.
thorns and different things you don't see where you regularly hunt.
I suppose the biggest worry I had ever for Hank through 11 seasons was a hunt we did in the the Nevada desert. And I'm telling you guys, it was the scariest thing. Hank got so far out in front, I actually lost contact with him. We had to go back to our host. We had to get a vehicle We had to drive out into the country where I had been hunting. I had to get out and whistle and holler and whistle and holler to find that boy, and it was getting dark, and there were coyotes in the area. I mean, honestly, I thought, what am I doing here? But we got a great show, and we got Hank back, so, it turned out, wow.
Some scary moments.
Yeah,
So
I hadn't
did
thought
you-
about that. I hadn't thought about it in a long time. Wow.
So-
Yeah, that was scary.
So Dad always said he was a big coon hunter, and back when he was doing it, I was probably, I think, one of the last couple years that he had gone and done that is I was 4 or 5. Well, if we lost a dog, we just threw a coat out.
Oh,
She'll
yeah.
be laying there the next morning. If we
Yep.
can't get her to come in, it didn't have any GPS. They didn't have. I think they had electronic collars in the late 90s or late 80s,
Yeah.
early 90s, but
Yeah.
they were expensive, and if you weren't standing connected to the dog, they weren't going to work that well. So as far as that, and are you still hunting today, and do you embrace any of the new technology?
I have, well, let's see, I'm an old guy. So, yes, I'm still hunting. I have a beautiful, handsome Llewellyn setter now, whose name is Chance, and he's out of Hank's lineage. And he's just the sweetest guy. And you know what, guys, I'm spoiled. I've had Llewellyns for so long, I'm just spoiled with them. They're just, of course, I had to train them, but still, they were so easy to train and so biddable and sweet in the house and great family dogs. I mean, really, it's pretty special.
So with your training, and some of the, a lot of the articles I've read about you to kind of be a little more familiar with you, and
Sorry to
you
hear
have
that.
kind of your own knack. It's called successive approximation, and I just
Right.
kind of have you maybe
Yeah.
explain about what that is a little bit for
Oh.
our viewers.
Successive approximation. Let's see. So you want your bird dog to retrieve a retrieving dummy. So the first step is not to throw it 20 yards and have him go after and get it because he won't know what you want. The first step through successive approximation is hold the dummy in your hand, reach down to your bird dog, open his mouth, insert the dummy, and say, fetch. Do that over and over and over. What happens? You put the dummy near the mouth, the dog opens his mouth. And then when you get that done, you hold the dummy 3 feet out in front of the dog and you say, fetch. And he goes over and he picks it up. Then you throw it out 6 feet and you say, fetch, and he goes and picks it up. And then you got a bird dog that retrieves. I mean, it's amazing.
So just a lot of recession and slow. A lot of people, when you say that, a lot of people have trained dogs in the past, been all over with lab training and had have my own
Yeah.
little thing that I do on the side, normally for myself now because I'm selfish. I just want to have my bird dogs.
Yeah.
But you start out slow, and that's one thing.
Yeah.
People, they expect too much, so little time.
Yeah.
And and molding a dog, dogs learn at a way different rate than humans do. We can't just say, hey,
Yeah. I
hey,
thought,
Wade, pick up that pen. He's either going to do it or
Yeah.
it's not. So you
I
you really have to mold and mold them into what you want.
I thought as an amateur trainer and a first-time pointing dog owner, the best thing I could do was get some advice. That's where I found Richard Walter's book, Gundog. And I studied that book cover to cover. And he was right. If you do it in successive approximation steps, they learn what you want them to learn. I mean, it was pretty amazing to watch.
Now, do you, as far as getting them into the field,
Uh-huh.
do you do that? Do you take them with an older dog so they can kind of mirror and image off the older dog, or do you prefer doing it all by themselves and just letting them figure it out? Let the natural
Well,
ability and the
yeah.
obedience you've put in them, just let them figure it out.
It was easy for me. I didn't have a pointing dog when I got Hank. So I trained Hank on my own. But then I got Dash, his boy, and it was, gosh, you guys, it was so easy. I'd go out in the field with Hank and Dash, And Dash would emulate what his dad did. I mean, it was so simple. And before I knew it, I had another bird dog who knew exactly what he had to do. Pretty amazing.
So at some point, then Hank got up there in years, and you kind of decided to retire him
Yeah,
from the TV show, and then
Yeah.
by that point, Dash was ready to kind of
Dash was
take
ready to
over
go.
for the old guy.
Yeah, he was ready to go.
Okay.
Hank, by the way, Hank was not happy.
I bet not.
He was not happy, but he was, you guys know what it's like. He was at a point in his life where he needed to take it easy. And I didn't, not only did we do the shows, we also did personal appearances. Lots and lots and lots of personal appearances. And in those appearances, Hank wouldn't just sit on a table so people could pet him. I'd take him out into the stage, and we'd put on a demonstration. And we did that for years. And he was, I mean, he was quite a guy, but it was time for him to just pack it in. And that's when Dash came along.
Now, hunting him when he was getting a little older, did he kind of, when you knew it was time to retire him, did he kind of give you that sign like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, certainly did. And I was really lucky that Dash was there because it was it was almost a changing of the guard by Hank and Dash themselves. Hank would take off and then he'd slow down. Dash would take off and go out in front, and Hank ended up backing Dash's points. And I never taught Hank to do that. He just did it automatically. But he was happy to do that.
He was glad to be in the field.
Yep, he sure
Glad to be in the field like my old guy was.
Yeah. Sweet, just the sweetest boy. And
So
we'd make these.
how many shows did you end up doing with Dash then?
Well, I don't know exactly. We did 135 shows altogether,
Oh, wow.
and it probably was split about maybe 60-40, Hank having 60% of the shows, and then Dash doing the rest. And then we did some specials in Uruguay and Scotland where we didn't take the boys. I went over there and hunted with their dogs, and that was fun too. Not having to worry about handling them in the field, just enjoying the outdoors and chasing birds around in Scotland and Uruguay. And I mean, really, a guy just gets lucky.
so out of all the places you've hunted and all the different species, I guess, what would be your favorite?
Oh my gosh. Wow. My very favorite. Wow. My favorite hunt was the most difficult, and it was hunting for grouse in the timber. Boy, that was it was rough. But it was great. I mean, we got a great show out of it. But just, what I really loved was watching the boys in an open field where the cameras could follow them and I could follow them and see what they were doing, and seeing them come on point, and it's just so much fun. Well, you know what it's like.
Yeah. Now, have you ever been to where we're at, to Iowa, for just or maybe something similar to maybe South Dakota?
South Dakota, definitely. North
Yep.
Dakota for sure. Minnesota, where I got my first and only white pheasant. Gee, a white pheasant.
I've seen one in my lifetime.
Yeah. When that bird hit the ground, it was one of our Hank shows. Hank had no idea what to do. I mean, he'd never seen this thing before. So it was very funny. But he picked it up and brought it in.
So what is I guess now, what is, in Oregon, are you still hunting grouse? Is that your main hunting source with the bird dogs, or can you get out and, get after multiple species? Or do you still do it, or?
Where Karen Ann and I live in Portland, it's in the western part of the state of Oregon. And the grouse population is in the far eastern state in the Blue Mountains, up above Pendleton, where I grew up, and little towns like Meacham and places like that. So they're a long way from here. So to hunt those, I'd have to spend a couple of days out. We did those for our shows, but around here, there's pheasants down here in the Willamette Valley, and that's where I take the boys.
Okay. One thing I did want to talk with you a little bit about was was Hank's induction into the Bird
Oh.
Dog Hall of Fame, and kind
Yeah.
of explain how that went, you know, as far as was it a
Wow.
nomination, or how did that go?
Wow. First of all, it was an incredible thrill. And to be able to do that, that was in the induction was in Grand Junction, Tennessee. And I flew down there to have Hank's portrait introduced into the Bird Dog Hall of Fame. So I didn't take Hank there, but I did take his portrait down there and offered it to the Hall of Fame. What a thrill. See my boy there.
Yeah, it's kind of it's really cool with that, and I look into all my dog's papers, and
Yeah.
I'm lucky to be paired up with a really good breeder, and we're working together, and you know, I was looking through the Hall of Fame yesterday, and it's like, wow, there's, you know, all the dogs in there, and they're on my pedigrees, and
Yeah.
just seeing the you know,
Yeah.
just being a part of that fraternity, you know, to
Yeah.
have a dog that would get that much recognition, and you know, a lot of them
Yeah.
are field trial dogs, big time, you know, 11-time champion Tacoma Mountain Sunrise, and
Yeah.
I was lucky to have a dog out of him, and Shadow Oak Bow, you know, some of the recent
Oh, yeah.
ones, and it's like, that is cool, and I guess I'll probably never have a Hall of Fame caliber dog, and in my mind they're all Hall of Fame, because I have
Yeah.
memories of them, but you know,
Yeah.
they all got a portrait on the wall, and in fact, if you walk into my parents' house, and Wade can attest to this, is I got 2 older sisters, and plenty of nieces and nephews, and first thing you see when you walk into my parents' house is my picture with my dogs. So I
Yeah.
call that the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
It's
And
not just a picture.
Yeah.
It's a portrait. I made sure that,
Yeah.
you know, that'd be a good spot. They remodeled their kitchen. That'd be a good spot for a picture of me and the dogs. And I
Yeah.
think my sister probably cusses under her breath every time they come in. But no, and that's a super special thing. And
Yeah.
you know, was that a nomination through just your viewers, or how did that get recognized?
I was notified by the Bird Dog Hall of Fame that Hank had been inducted, and would I come down and present his portrait? And I said, sure. When I got there, I asked some questions about this whole process, and it's it's kind of complicated, actually. You've got to be nominated by somebody, and then they've got to vote, and then it's got to be approved and all of that. So, and the thing is that Hank was not a field trial dog. He was just a bird dog. And so I was actually I was honored, but I was surprised actually that they wanted him there.
Now, did you breed him a lot, and was there a lot of puppies? I mean, I'm sure people were just begging for dogs, you know, just because of, you know, who he was, and you know, obviously the caliber of dog he was.
Yeah.
Was that a big want? Did you do that a lot, or?
We did it, but not a lot. No, it wasn't a priority for me or for my wife, Karen Ann. We just wanted to have a nice bird dog, and that's kind of how I didn't really think that much about, breeding him all that much. We tried a couple of times.
Now, you were they successful breedings? Is there,
Yeah,
you know, there's some puppies. Did you keep any?
no.
Oh, you did not. Okay.
Well, Dash was, I guess Dash was one of Hank's offspring somewhere. So that's what we did with him. Was for his TV show we had Dash, and he was related to Hank.
Okay. And I guess we can't remiss and thank your wife for helping you with all this technology stuff. I think Will has a button for a round
She's
of applause
right here.
back there if he can find it.
Yeah, Karen Ann's right here. She does have to do this for me. I mean, I can smile on cue, and that's about it, fellas.
Yeah, and the hat. You know, I made you
Yep.
put the hat on because that's,
Yep.
you know, every picture I've ever seen you've had that
Well,
hat.
there's
Yeah.
a story about the hat, isn't there? I mean, you always wore a hat, but
Yep.
what happened when you?
Well, Noggin Tops wanted me to wear one of their hats. because I always wore a hat. And so the Naugatuck person flew out here. I'm in Portland, flew out to Portland, and we met. And that's how that happened. And I said, yeah. He said, would you wear our hats? I said, sure, I'll wear your hats. They're nice looking. And so I said, sure.
Now, when I see an old school bird hunter, I just see that hat, and I don't know why. I don't think I could
Yeah.
I could put one. I could rock one probably as good as you could. But
They're,
that's always kind of been my thing. I want someday to have one of those hats, and I can walk out.
yeah.
It's so windy here. I don't know if it would stay on our
Oh,
head very well.
well,
You'd
these
probably have
hats,
to have a chin strap.
these hats come with a chin strap.
Oh,
Yeah. And you hook them up underneath the inside of the hat and they come down around your chin. Yeah, they work great. I did it. I wore it a few times on our shows when we were in Alaska, especially hunting ptarmigan. Oh my God, the wind can blow there. And so we did that for those shows for sure. Boy, that was fun. Ptarmigan in Alaska. Wow.
now did you do that before the snow was knee
Yeah.
deep and they
Yeah.
and do they turn a phase white or are they always white? That was always
No, they turn. The season up there opens in the middle of August,
okay.
usually around the 10th, somewhere in there. So we'd go up there then when there was no snow on the ground and the ptarmigan were, God, guys, the ptarmigan were everywhere. And it was, we had more trouble deciding what birds to shoot and how many we wanted to shoot for the shows than any other shows we did. I mean, they were just everywhere.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And here I am, a seasoned bird hunter, and I giggled the whole time we were up there.
So I want to know, having been in the same position, I want to know, do you show the misses as well as the
Absolutely.
the good hits?
Absolutely. You bet. But I'll tell you what, since my mother was a skeet shooting champion, she taught me how to shoot. And so I didn't miss often. But when I did, if I did, we put it in the show. And sometimes I had to take 2 shots at birds to bring them down.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's important. I think everybody has to, I do my fair share of missing, so it's kind of,
Yeah.
it's kind of part of it. And then
Yeah.
with my sons in the show, that's always
Yeah.
part of the rub that goes on in the field if you miss or if one
Yeah.
of them actually misses and
Yeah. Honestly, I was so
enjoy
lucky.
that.
I was so lucky to live in that house. My mother was a fantastic shot and an excellent teacher. Even though she shot right-handed and I shot left-handed, she was able to teach me how to handle that shotgun and hit the things I was aiming at. And we spent a lot of time out on the skeet range.
And one of the
Yeah.
one of the questions I had too is now when you're doing the show and
Mhm.
obviously those were scheduled quite a ways out.
Yeah,
from-
I was the producer, and so part of my job was to find locations,
Okay.
schedule the shows, schedule the travel, schedule the lodging, all of that.
So would you try to do a certain number of shows per month, or what was your target?
Our target was 13 shows a year. And so when I tried to, for, the scale of economies, I would go out and try to find places where we could maybe at least get 2 shows in at the same location to cut down our travel expenses. But that wasn't hard to do. There's so many opportunities to hunt. And honestly, guys, once Hank got in the air, everybody wanted us there. I mean, everybody wanted. It was just easy. The first year, I had to search for places to hunt. Nobody knew who I was. I'd been on local television, but I'd never been on national television, so they didn't know who I was. And so I had to do some convincing. But after the first year and all the accolades that we got and all the awards we got, that's when people started saying, hey, come out here and hunt our birds.
Then you just got your pick. Then you had to decide
Yeah.
what kind of species of bird maybe you were going
Yep.
to go after. And
Yeah, we had to do some, as you can imagine, we did some varieties with the type of birds from quail to pheasants, chuckers, rough grouse, sharp-tailed grouse in the prairies. Boy, pretty good way to make a living.
yeah, no kidding. Wow.
Yeah.
I kind of know how that part of that, but there is a lot of work to the logistic part of it, especially when
Yeah.
you were doing it
Yeah.
yourself. You were doing all
Yeah.
those parts and pieces yourself.
Yeah, I had a fantastic crew, and that made it so much easier in the field because these guys knew exactly what to do. One of the cameramen was not a hunter, so I had prior to ever getting on the Hunting with Hank series, I had to teach him about hunting and ethics and safety and what to expect from Hank and how he would react to certain situations. And then we were off and running.
And then were you using one camera or two or?
Two, always had two. Yeah,
So you
yeah.
usually had a close shot and a wide shot then going probably most of the time.
One of the cameras was always assigned to Hank because, I mean, it was his show. And then the other camera was kind of a catch-all. It did just a variety of other things, including having me on camera talking to our viewers,
And I think
which I thought that was important.
yes, I think that was kind of one of the things I remember about your show was, I don't know, call it a minuet or whatever, but it was kind of during the show, there was always this moment where you would sit on a log or you would take a time
Yeah.
out and you
Right.
would talk about the location you were at and
Right.
or the species of bird or the people that
Right.
you were enjoying the hunt with, but you kind
Right.
of put it into words for the people that were watching. I recall.
You know, I learned that. I learned that as a folk singer. And one of the things I learned early was get the audience involved, keep them involved. And I just did the same thing with our TV shows.
Yeah, and just having a story all the time is probably something well, I know is important. You know, I wish I could do this for a living and hunted for a living, and when I
Yeah.
take kids, I take a lot of kids hunting, and I usually take some time to just sit down after we do all the safety stuff. We do a little walking, kind of regroup in the field, and I put together a story. Whether it was
Right.
an old hunting story or something about the land we're on, and I think it grabs their attention a little bit. Like, this isn't just about going out and shooting something. We
Yeah.
talk about the dogs, and
Yeah.
a lot of them, it's the perception that you get from them is like, okay, there's more to this than just going out and shooting a bird, and whether it's fishing shows or hunting shows or whatever,
Yeah.
any kind of show, you just have to kind of go with that. And sales, when I go for sales calls for my work, I got to have a story, because if I don't have a story, I'm not going to get any engagement.
Yeah. When I look back on this and think about when I came up with the concept, I could have named it anything, but I thought, it really ought to be Hank's show. And so that's why I decided to name it that. And, I just hung on to his skirt and just followed him around.
He was the star. He was the star.
He was and besides that, he was a nice boy,
Yeah.
a really nice boy.
How many? So you do 13 shows a season,
Yeah.
and you did that for how many seasons with Hank?
11.
11. My goodness.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a
With
lot of
Hank and Dash, 11 shows. And then we did some specials in Uruguay and Scotland. We did some Des Young Wing Shooter Journal specials there. And we got those shows because of the popularity of Hank.
So I know there's a little bit about that wing shooting, during the show and to now. What kind of guns are you carrying? What are your favorite guns you got in the cabinet?
Browning, 20 gauge, side-by-sides, improved and modified barrels.
And that's always been your go-to gun.
Yeah, yeah. And Karen Ann, who loves to hunt with me, has a 20 gauge, and it's a
16 gauge Merc.
16 gauge Merkel. And boy, what a sweet gun that is! Wow.
So she's shooting a little extra power then.
Yeah, and she knows how to do it. She just having our viewers absolutely loved her when she was on our show. So that was always a lot of fun when Karen Ann could break away from her career and join us in the field somewhere.
Yeah, and it's good to have a good guest on, and especially when they're pretty and they can shoot a gun. That's even better.
No kidding. Exactly right. Yeah. The only thing that bothered me was she was better looking than me.
I have that same problem
all the time,
all the time.
all the time.
You know, and the guests that are listening live, if you have any questions, feel free to post them up on our site there in the live discussion. And
Got Des
and
here, right in
Des
front
is-
of you here.
You got Des right here.
All those
and,
questions you always wanted to know.
we did have a comment from, I'm gonna probably butcher the last name, but Bruce Wondrak, and he said that Richard Walters Gun Dog was his favorite training guide too.
Yeah, I really, actually, you guys, really, it's the Bible that an amateur trainer like me should have in his or her hands when you got a puppy down there looking up at you and basically saying, okay, what do I do?
Yeah, and I went to some schooling down in Texas just for dog training. I did the college thing. I thought, you know what, dogs are my thing. So I
Yeah.
went down there and kind of did the dog psychology, canine behavioralist stuff, and then I was lucky enough to get paired up with a retriever trainer and some of the best retriever trainers in the country to really learn that aspect of just being able to see that dog, give them what they're asking,
Yeah.
even though you're getting what you want. And
Yeah.
and as far as older mentors, I've been hunting with my dad, and he had dogs, and one of his friends, and just mentors. And have you had that opportunity to have somebody come up with you and mentor them, and with hunting and shooting, and like your parents did?
Well, it was my mother. She was the one who took me out into the field. She was a skeet shooting champ in Oregon, and she loved being in the outdoors. And even when I was too young to carry a shotgun, I'd go out with her in the field and follow her around. And then we'd fly fish in the summer, and it was an idyllic growing up with mom being able to do all that for and with me. And then I had her on a couple of shows, of course, and she had an absolute ball.
Now, did she shoot into her later years too, or did she kind of just pass the torch to you? Or?
No, she was in her 70s, and I want to say way into her 70s when I had her on our show, and she was great. Of course, she couldn't spend an entire day in the field, so we'd take lots of breaks, and we'd make sure that she was comfortable and the terrain wasn't too difficult. But she had an absolute ball, and our viewers, they just loved her. It was so nice to be able to do that for her.
Yeah, I don't think I can even talk my mother into going out in the field with me. She took my 3-year-old. She actually CJ turns 3 in a couple days, but she took her out in the field, and I think she was 5 months old. And her and my dad, and they didn't want to lose her. I said, just let her go. She's just a baby. She'll come back. And we found out that as a puppy she had a motor,
Yeah.
and wanted to get gone and get lost. And I got this call, and I lost your dog, and I can hear her. She's running through the CRP, and I'm like, oh no. So I was like 40 minutes away, and they were watching her for me because I was working, and they were just kind of bringing her up through the house. And I drove all the way up there, and I don't know, I drove as fast as my truck could go with. And
Yeah.
she's calling me. I don't know where she's at. I don't know if she fell somewhere, or she's in a hole,
Yeah.
or an animal got her. And I said, well, just go back to the truck. I bet she went to the truck. Luckily, that puppy went back to the truck, got lost.
Yeah.
But I think that was the one and only time my mom got out in the field with the bird dogs, and I've been begging her to come just for a walk. She
Yeah.
hates birds. She said if I ever had a chicken or a pet chicken or anything in the yard, she'd never come to my house ever again.
Oh.
So having her see me shoot one, and then the dogs carrying around, but no, that is on my bucket list. And I know if she's watching, I need her to comment and say that, yes, I promise I will go hunting with you this fall. So that is on my bucket list. She doesn't have to shoot. I just want her to go along. So no,
Yeah.
I think that's special. And
Yeah,
as
very.
far as she says, it's all true. So she did make a comment that it is all true. So, but as far as what are you doing now? Are you still educating, still doing appearances? what are you doing now that the show is kind of over? And
I'm not making appearances anymore. I'm still that's the wrong term. I'm still answering fan mail. It's amazing how much fan mail still comes in from people who watch The Boys and they just loved them. And so that's really sweet. And I'm not making personal appearances anymore. I made enough of those when The Boys were on the air that that was plenty. So
are you active in any organizations as far as, like a Rough Grouse Society, Pheasants Forever, anything like that?
nope, I'm not. I was involved in some of those when I was on the tube and didn't, forgive me, fellas, but there were a number of issues that I wasn't comfortable with, and so I don't do that anymore.
Go ahead. I'm doing all the talking.
I'm just
I want to
enjoying
make
it.
sure Wade's still awake over there.
I told you, I'm taking a
Well,
nap.
Wade, you wouldn't be the first member of my audience that fell asleep on me.
No, I'm just, I'm just thinking back to those shows, and I think the great thing about, well, like, I've hunted with Thomas quite a bit this last year, and
Good.
we give each other a hard time, but at the same point, it's good for me at my age to be able to see that at least there's a younger generation that's going to be continuing to do the sport that we love long after
Yeah.
we're gone.
Yeah.
And if we can generate more of those people through the TV shows that you did and that I did, and if people see that and want to experience it, because you and I know if you get that person in the field, you pretty
Yeah.
much got them hooked.
Oh,
They just
absolutely.
have to experience that dog. And
Yep.
if you can get a youngster, or you can get a person that maybe hasn't hunted and is wanting to experience it, and you get them in the field and watch that dog work, it's magic. It just is.
Yep.
And so we try to do that. Thomas does a lot of mentoring with some of the youth, and
Good.
that's
Good.
a passion he has. And we do some guiding and at a preserve, and a lot of that is to keep the dogs working and give them some activity and me some activity. But along the way, we get a chance to take a lot of newbies into the field, people that haven't either hunted over a gun dog before and haven't shot at
Yeah.
a bird before, and you're like,
Yeah.
how can this be? But the generation now has changed, and there's just not a lot of. If you didn't grow up with if your dad or your uncle or your grandfather like me, if they're not hunters, then how do these young people get exposed to it? And so
Yeah.
that's kind of the mission, I guess, that we always are trying to
Yeah.
find somebody else to get in the sport.
We have a really nice skeet and trap range south of Portland. And the thing that has fascinated me when I go down there is how many of those people, mostly men, but some women, shoot, but they don't hunt. They just want to shoot clay targets, see how many they can break, and they're not getting out of the field.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's by choice. Perhaps it is with some. Is it a situation where access to land and places to hunt? I mean,
Yeah,
you were
which
talking
is
about
getting-
the ranch
yeah.
that you grew up on,
Yeah.
and a place to hunt didn't ever even entered your mind back in those days because
Yeah.
that you had that world, at your fingertips. You could hunt whatever you wanted to. You had this great expanse, but today when it's just harder and harder to find good private ground and people will let you hunt, and
Yeah.
there is some public, but sometimes there's birds and sometimes there isn't, and what I found with some of the youngsters is if they don't have something immediately happening, they kind of they'll drift on you and they kind of get bored and
Yeah, exactly.
want to go back to those video games again, so
Yeah. Yeah.
so you got to keep you hope that bird's there someplace. So
I
Yeah,
took,
I have a rule that
Yeah.
the phone stays in your pocket.
oh yeah,
Unless we
good rule.
stop for a picture, and I'll tell you to get it out. And they said, "Well, do you want me to leave it in the truck?" And I said, "Well, if I go down, somebody's got to call 911." So, but and also you have an audiobook on Amazon. Would you kind of want to share with that a little bit? We'll give you a little plug on that.
Wow. Well, Yeah, it is. I had forgotten about that, you guys. Yeah, it's there. I did that some time ago. And then I also had the written book that is sold out. And so I was just an opportunity for me to share in audio form some of the stories I told in my book.
And when you say fan mail, is that, are you still getting invites to go hunting wherever you want? Do you have anything planned as far as this fall coming up to go on a trip, or you
I
just kind of
have
staying local?
I have a really nice young bird dog that has to get out. So I need to get him out in the fall and the winter if I can. And I still enjoy getting out in the field and hunting. I mean, it's just a thrill to be out there and see a dog do what he is born to do. And then hopefully every once in a while hit something that gets up.
Well, I tell you, it's been a pleasure getting a chance to talk to you. I mean, after watching your show back in the day, many
Oh,
times,
thank you.
and then getting a setter myself and experiencing that, and
Yeah,
always thinking about Hank and dogs like Lou that basically,
yeah,
you know, are always, will always be in our hearts, and then their
yeah,
offspring, and so you start another one if you can, and I'm to that point where, of course, I've got a younger dog, 6, so that dog will probably get me going for a while. But every time you think, I don't think I want to start another one. There'll never be one as good, but
yeah,
they may not be, but they may have other qualities and that put them on a different level than the last guy was. But that's what we try for. That's what you hope out of the offspring is you get one that's better than dad. And if that happens, then that's great. So,
yeah.
but
And
it's been
my
it's been
boys,
great.
my boys have always been part of the family too. So it's nice to have them around even in the off season because they're just nice guys,
Is
just
that
nice
is that
guys.
what is that the setter? I mean, you obviously got into setters there. But you weren't kind of you didn't grow up with them like a lot of
No,
people have, and neither did I. But when you got that setter, what was it about setters that said, I think I want to try this
wow.
breed?
Well,
Did you know somebody that had one?
no, we had, Karen Ann and I had flushers. And when we lost, and Karen Ann she loves to hunt, but she couldn't keep up with a flushing dog in the field. And so when we lost our last flusher, I just started looking around to see what was out there and looked at all the pointing breeds. And the setter just drew me like a moth to a flame. And so I, I got some information on setters. I found out who was doing some breeding. I called a breeder and there were some puppies available. And I asked if there was a male in the puppies and he said there was. And I said, send it out. And the next thing I knew, I was at the airport and Hank leaped out from the carrier into my arms.
And the rest is history.
Yeah, and I always tell Wade, I got, had I went through the same scenario you did. When I was younger, we had always had a flusher. We had our friends had flushers, and we started with a Chesapeake, and then we go.
Oh,
We found this little horseback dog that wouldn't run off a horseback, so that's how we started with a setter,
no.
and got her at a good price. A great friend, still a great friend. He cut my hair till I was out of town, and local barber, and I don't think there's, and I might be a little biased, but and some of my short hair buddies even say it. Well, they're too hairy, but that is the prettiest point to walk in on
Yeah,
when they got a little wind at their face, and that flag is a flying,
yeah.
and
It's
Nothing like
something.
it's poetic, I guess I would have
Yeah.
to say.
My director, I just absolutely love him. And we had 2 cameramen on our show. And our B cameraman, his primary responsibility was to videotape and follow Hank in the field. That was his job. My A cameraman, Bob Corley, his job was to be with me. And But whenever Hank would come on point, both those guys would disappear. They'd go down. Both cameras would be on Hank, getting different angles and this, that, close-ups and wide shots. And that's what I mean, it was Hank's show, so that's what we did. And then they'd back the camera up so I could walk in and flush what was ever there.
Did it take him some? That's one question I forgot I was going to ask you. Did it take Hank some time to, instead of thinking some guy's chasing me and there's a guy standing here, it's not Dad, he's not flushing the bird, or some guy with a big black box on his shoulder standing. Did that really phase him, or was he just so intense on finding that bird and pointing that he didn't care?
Yeah, didn't bother him a bit. God, he was such a sweet guy, fellas. I mean, he was just a doll, and so lovable and so trainable. I mean, I'm an amateur trainer. He was so trainable, and he paid no attention to the cameras when we were out in the field. None. He paid attention to me, and he paid attention to the birds, and that was it.
He wasn't a prima donna or anything like
No, I'm the prima donna.
Well, Des, I tell you what, it's been a pleasure, and we've really enjoyed getting a chance to chat with you tonight, and
Well, thank
kinda
you.
talk and reminisce a little bit about Hank and Dash and some of your great dogs, and yeah, we'll always remember him, and
Yeah,
I want to make sure that everybody out there, if they haven't heard of Hank, and I bet if they're setter people they have, but they could still get some of those DVDs and still check out some of those shows. So
we would go to these sportsman's events, and I would get out, we'd fly somewhere and get Hank out, get him into the rental car, and we'd drive to the location, and we'd get out of the rental car, and we'd head to the doors. Do you think anybody said, "Hey, look, there's Des"? No, no. They said, "Look, it's Hank." And they'd come running out, getting pictures. Would they want pictures with me? No. I actually had, this is the truth, guys. I actually had people give me their camera and say, "Would you take a picture of me with
the way it
Hank?"
should be,
Yep.
the way it should be.
Yeah. My mom always said, "Hey, you deserve that."
Yeah, well, once again, Des, we appreciate you taking the time, and
Thank you so much.
and your lovely wife for helping us out,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah,
appreciate
she's
her
great.
and giving us your time. And next week we are actually going to have Eric Van Hook from the Iowa Rough Grouse Society, so we're excited about that. They're trying to bring the grouse back to Iowa, so we're going to do some chatting about that and learning what they're doing. So once again, we want to thank you, and
Thank you very much.
we'll be back here next week, 7 o'clock Central Time, live on Facebook and
Yeah.
YouTube, and you can listen on Spotify and all the major podcast networks after. And I'm gonna come up with a catchphrase, so keep their nose in the wind. Thanks, guys.
Their nose in the wind.